overview of Amazon Web Service. So before moving to the console, let's have some introduction to AWS. As I told you, AWS is a leading provider of cloud computing services worldwide. Right now, currently, it is offered 200 plus services that both architectures, developer, and even users can use from anywhere at any time. So AWS server services provide customer in more than 190 plus countries, including thousands of educational institutes and even government organization. AWS has also a special separate cloud for government organization, which is called AWS government related AWS G Cloud, which is government cloud. Right, currently major companies like ESPN, Adobe, Twitter, Netflix, all these big giants companies are rely on the AWS. Facebook, BBC, ESPN, these are the major companies that are the customer of AWS. They are renting their resources from the AWS. Netflix uses AWS for nearly all its computing and storage needs. So they are running hundred of functions or more than 100,000 server instances. So I was reading an article. So the article was saying Netflix has hired more than 100,000 virtual computers in AWS. So this was a brief introduction to the AWS, and let's have some brief history. As AWS was launched in 2002, but in 2006 AWS, or you can say in 2000, in the end of 2006 or in the start of 2007, AWS officially launched its cloud computing products. So in 2006 it was the time when company moved from their own premises to Google Cloud, into the public cloud. Not all companies, I mean the companies who bought their services from AWS. And you can see over the years, AWS has rapid its services and it has become a global reach. AWS revenue growth from $4.6 billion in 2005 to $10 billion in 2006. You can see in just 1 year, AWS surpassed the $10 billion revenue target. So in 2006, AWS continued to add new services like Snowball, and now they are very mostly focusing on services related to the AI. And AWS still remains the global leader in industries and continuing adding their new services. So since we have already familiar with the cloud, with the history, with the introduction, let's have some basic understanding of the AWS component. This is a very major component in AWS. Meanwhile, we are working on AWS, you will keep hearing the words like region, availability zones, also education. We won't use education, it is not very used, but it is also a concept of AWS global infrastructure. AWS global infrastructures consist of multiple regions around the world. Okay, so each region consists of several availability zones and also edge location. So these this is the global infrastructure of AWS that ensure reliable and efficient cloud services. In the next slide, I will cover each of one in detail. But as of January 2024, AWS is available in 33 global regions with 105 availability zones, and it is continues to expand. What is region? What is availability zone? We will discuss this in next slide. So uh, by the way, right now, currently, AWS has very 33 regions around the world, and it is still increasing. When we have more region, it means we will face less latency. For example, the Netflix, if the service of Netflix is not available in your country, but if you use with, let's suppose, if you use with the VPN, or if somehow you manage to run a video on Netflix, you will see it will have a very high latency. It will keep lagging. Why? Because the infrastructure of the Netflix is not available in your country. That's why the giants companies like AWS keep expanding their region, so they can cover most of the region and provide you the cloud services with very low latency. So yeah, so what is the AWS region? Actually, AWS region is a geographical area that include at least two availability zones. If geographical area has more than two availability zone, it will call region. What is availability zone? Availability zone is nothing but a data center. So if a geographical region consists of more than two availability zone, more than two data center, it will call a geographical region. So regions are isolated from each other to increase the security and stability. AWS regions actually are named after the location where they reside. For example, US East region, we have US West region, we have Europe region, we have Middle East region. These all are the geographical area. For example, let's say US East region. This is the region, and in the region we will have multiple availability zone. So what is the availability zone? Availability zone is a data center. We will cover this in next slide. So region is nothing but a geographical area with at least two data centers. We have, as we discussed in the previous slide, we have 33 regions. It means we have 33 geographical area. We have multiple in USA, multiple in Europe, multiple in Middle East, multiple in India. So these all are the geographical regions. Okay, so when we do not have geographical region in the place we reside, so we use the near one region. For example, in Pakistan, and there is no AWS region, so we use either the Bahrain region, or we can also use the Mumbai region. So this is the how regions work. Okay, so this is availability zone. This is a very important concept. As you can see, we have a AWS region. This is the boundary of AWS region. Let's say this is the East US region. East US region. And in this East US region, we have three availability zones. So these are the data center, and these will be connected with each other. So availability zone are actually made up of data centers within a region. And availability zone can either a one data center, or it can be multiple data center, but all will be connected with each other. So these data center contain multiple servers. For example, if there is a data center, it will have multiple servers, it will have multiple switches, multiple firewalls. So these data center are you have all the equipments, all the resources that are needed for the cloud computing. And uh, Amazon only undisclosed the location of region, but it does not tell the region, the location of availability zone. For example, if you have a AWS region, east region, the East Ohio region, but it will AWS will not tell that the data center you are choosing located in which town of Ohio. So in simple words, these data center have undisclosed location, so it can be somewhere in a country or in a region, but it will be definitely inside the region. Okay, so as January 2024, there are there are 105 availability zones that are present inside the 33 regions. First, we will select a computer VM that we want to deploy, and then it will ask us the region in which we want to deploy your application. For example, we say East US region, Ohio region. Okay, so when we select the Ohio region, it will ask us in which availability zone of Ohio you want to deploy. Either you want to deploy in AZ1, AZ2, AZ3. So if we select AZ1, then it will be deployed in the one data center of Ohio. But if we want to deploy application in multiple data centers to, let's say, to increase the high availability, or to save from the disaster in the Ohio region, we can deploy the replication of our virtual computer into the multiple availability zone at the same time. So a concept of availability zone is very handy when we want to consider the things like high availability, replication, or disaster recovery. For example, if we deployed our application in two availability zone, in two data centers of the Ohio region. For example, if a disasters, a flood comes in a one availability zone, but your application won't be interrupted because it has a replication in another availability zone. So that's why we have the concept of availability zones or the data centers. We mostly use the concept of availability zones when we want to have the replications in multiple data centers. But it is compulsory to select at least one availability zone in a region. First we will select the region, and then we will select the availability zone. So we can either select one availability zone, or we can select up to the three availability zone. If we select the three availability zone, then our application will be deployed in the three of these availability zones. So if two of these availability zones get down, your application won't be interrupted because it will be still running in one availability zone. Okay, And then we have another concept of AWS education. You won't see this in your labs or in your AWS hands-on labs, because we mostly work with these AWS regions and AWS availability zones. But there is another concept of education that I want to cover. So educations are like the endpoints for AWS, but the main concept of why we use this education for the caching content. So educations consist of CloudFront, which is Amazon Content Delivery Network. So it is a CDN, which we will be discussing upcoming lecture. When we will discuss the advance of cloud computing, we will cover what is Amazon Content Delivery Network, what is Amazon CloudFront. So when we use the CloudFront, we have the option to deploy our application on the edge location. So edge locations are more than the regions. For example, we know we only have the 33 regions in the world, but currently we have more than 150 edge location. Edge location is not a region, but it is a very small location that AWS have, or it is used for caching the content. Edge location are mainly located in most of the major cities, to reduce the latency rate. For example, some of the users access your website from Singapore, then this request would be redirected to the edge location closest to Singapore, where the cached data can be read. Or if I give you another example, Pakistan is also very big example of edge location. We do not have any region in the Pakistan, but if a customer from Pakistan want to access a very low latency, something like, for example, they want to play a video game, online video game, where they want a very low latency, but we do not have any region. So in such case, the concept of educations comes to handy. AWS have a contract with many internet service provider, like we have a government level provider of service, internet service provider, which is called PTCL. So in Pakistan, AWS education have a contract with PTCL, and they give their rack in their data centers to deploy a small region location of edge location. So when we have the concepts of caching, when we want to uh, cache our content, then we will use the edge location. We do not mostly use edge location. We only use this edge location when we are working with the CloudFront. What is CloudFront? We will discuss this in an upcoming lecture. When we will discuss the CloudFront, your concept of edge location will be clear then. So what is AWS management console? uh, so one way to manage cloud resource is through the web-based console. So where you log in, what is the AWS management console? AWS management console is the place where you log in and click on your desired service. So and then you can rent your desired service all through the graphical user interface. So AWS management console is the easiest way to create and manage your resources when you first beginning with the cloud. So these services are placed in the categories such as compute, databases, storage, security. These all are the categories. And then in the we have a region selector where we can click and change our region. So if I go to here, this is the console management. Now this is the a place where we manage our AWS cloud. We have the category here, we have a region selector here, we have a search bar here.